Hey, so what I'm going to share with you here is a Q&A inside of our Your Body Reset Facebook group. If you've been following us for a while, you can join this for free by going to Facebook and searching Your Body Reset. The questions were submitted by a bunch of our members in one of our reset programs like the Thyroid, Menopause and Gut Health programs. And there were some really insightful questions here, going from really the nitty-gritty of thyroid numbers to sleep quality, to deeper understandings of nutrition and general movement. The kind of questions that you don't know what to ask, but once they're asked, you are happy that you heard them. There was just a lot of different angles. Hopefully I give some good responses, and I'm confident that most people can get some benefit out of this. It's the type of content that gives you a more insightful overview with a bit more context and more confidence that you're making the right decisions or knowing how to make tweaks along the way, because you're hearing from other people's questions in similar spots to you. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. Hey boys and girls, we're here for the live Q&A for the month. If you're in one of our reset programs, whether that be thyroid, gut, menopause, or even our blood work program, we put this out once a month to answer any questions that have come through. We had a bunch of really good questions and actually quite a good range of different questions. So I'm going to start on those. If there's anything you want more more depth on, drop them in the chat and it should hopefully pop through on my screen here, and we'll go through them if I see them pop up as well. All right, so I'm just going to start with the first ones that come up for me, and then we can start to build from there. But if you're on here live, comment live. If you're watching the replay, just comment replay. It helps more people in this group see. We've got nearly 9,000 people in this group, so your comments can help just get this in front of more people. And usually it's answering the questions that they had or the ones they didn't know to ask, and it actually is still helpful. We see it all the time. We do this regularly with our own members as well, and it's usually very helpful. So I'm going to start with a couple of the ones, as I said, that have come through. And first one I'm going to start on, which is very much more of a thyroid discussion, and actually a really common one for what we see, although it comes across a little bit more complex. So the first part I want to start with from Haley was my TSH has dropped from 2.5 to 0.15 in 3 months. So if you're not sure, TSH is a key receptor or communicator from your brain to your thyroid. It's not actually thyroid hormone, right? But it gives a nice indicator of whether it's shouting to your thyroid to make more, or if it's kind of stopped and jumped off a cliff like this one. 2.5 to 1.5, 0.15 is very low. But look, Haley, I'm going to answer this for you. So free T4 has gone from 11.3 to 13.1, so that's good. And free T3 was tested at 5.7, which is also quite good. It wasn't tested 3 months ago, so it's interesting to know. I'd love to know where that was, but as you said, that hasn't come through. My doctor has come back and said all okay, even though TSH is low. What could that mean? So actually, in this particular case, I do agree with your doctor, because we want your T3 to be roughly between 5 and 6, right? And it is 5.7. That's really, really good. And Haley, the main thing that we are concerned about, of course, if there's still symptoms coming through and you're feeling that, we could look into antibodies, we could look into reverse T3 and in other areas that this might be a concern. But although a very drastic change, a very reactive adjustment from 2.5, which is too far one way, to 0.15, way off the charts the other way. It's a pretty drastic change. Now, how much your TSH can change in 2 or 3 months is pretty drastic, so it's not unheard of or something's wrong with you. What it simply means is that now that your T4 is starting to get back into range, now T4 is arguably still a little bit low at 13, but considering the right amount is being converted into T3 and the active form T3 is in a really healthy spot, the actual numbers tell me that things are feeling better. And what you should find is over the next 3 to 6 months, TSH does start to stabilize. So it's dropped down to 0.15 to say, whoa, something's changed. I don't need to shout at my thyroid to do something because it's doing something. And hopefully now it starts, what we see it do is come back into, a 0.8, a 1, a 1.5 sort of range. So it's definitely going to be something to monitor. The follow-up question I would always ask here is, the numbers look good, which is great, or at least the T3 and T4 is getting better. Where are symptoms at? Do you feel good, or are things still feeling as bad as they were 3 months ago? If that is still a yes, there's still issues, we'd want to dig there and find out what else might be pulling that energy down. So hopefully that answers that question. Really good question, Haley, and thanks for so much specificity there. But TSH is quite volatile, and kind of highlights for anyone else that has thyroid issues or interested in finding out more why just testing TSH by itself is such a small part of the picture. Looking at T4 and T3 is really important. So I hope that helps. Second one, Rachel, we came through. Should we be weighing ourselves? If so, how often? If not, why not? Look, I think I'm going to answer this the same way I would with plenty of our clients, which is through the lens that we want to measure what matters. Now, if weight is a goal for you, great. And is it body fat or is it purely just weight? Now, 99% of the times, it's likely going to be body composition. You're wanting to change shape. You want to shift a bit of body fat around your middle, whatever it might be. So in this particular case, I still track weight. And for me personally, I still track sort of once a week. And I think that's a nice balance. I tend to be a fan of finding a day that's quite consistent. So say your Wednesday and you track just once a week, because there's going to be a volatility of 1, maybe even up to 3 kilos a week through your weight. And that can mean all sorts of factors, under recovery, holding a bit more water, all sorts of things. But it does allow us to get us a nice little accurate measure of where to start. Okay. Alongside that, I would be recommending that we track some sort of other visual element. So I actually am a big fan of photos because it gives us a good sense of structure. Are you holding yourself well? Is the training causing you to round and cause imbalances? Or are you standing tall and are you looking good? Is your skin feeling good? Are you holding muscle in the right places? Are you stripping off body fat in the right places? That sort of thing. All right. So yes, weigh yourselves, but being able to look at some other measure, whether it be a tape measure of waist and arms and things, or whether just photos, that can be very revealing. That can be good and bad, but I promise you it is very helpful in regards to seeing any sort of progress. And we do recommend more than just weighing weight for all of our clients, but hopefully that gives you an idea. I think you should. If there's a particular body composition goal, it's a nice addition to add there. And I think it's important that if you are trying to focus on body composition, you want to measure something there too. All right. Really good question. So more on the weighing, more on the thyroid function. Another one here, more in sort of the sleep recovery space. I can fall asleep okay, but I wake up at around 2 to 3 most mornings, and I can't get back to sleep. Is this stress, hormones, or something else that I need to get checked? It's a really good question, and it can mean a couple of different things. Something that a lot of our clients will know quite well here will be that there's usually a sense of certain time frames that can mean different things. So what I mean by that is we can have, if it's every 2 hours, right, 1 to 3 hours, and you're waking up really, really through the night, which is actually really common, it can be a little bit more to do with glucose control, or more commonly. It doesn't mean it's the only reason, but it can be a more common reason for that to come through. So it might be something like what you're having in your last meal, really trying to address total glucose control, really, really important part of improving that process, okay? So that would be, if you're going to bed at 10, it could be somewhere around that 12 to 1 o'clock. For you, it's more the 2 to 3. Now, what we see in that sort of more 3 to 5 hour time range tends to be more liver congestion or a couple other areas, but that's kind of the most prominent one. And what I mean by that is if there's a lot of stress and a lot of those enzymes coming through in your blood work, it can mean that your sleep is a little lighter. You're not getting those deep restorative hours. You may be waking up to pee, and it's not because, in most cases, the bladder is not able to hold it. It's that you are needing to excrete toxins from the body. And in many ways, it's a mechanism to get rid of those toxins through the night. So if you need to get up to pee or even a bowel motion through the night, a lot of those signals, if happening on a regular basis, and it's always that sort of 3 to 5 hours in the night, we would look a little bit more into liver function. And then the final one, if I'm going to bring up the sort of big three here, tends to be a combination of either oxidative stress physically or more of that cognitive load, that sort of stress. And I think this is a common one that runs under the radar and certainly very common for a lot of busy professionals that we work with is what's happening throughout the day that's causing that sort of alert wake up. Because if it's not necessarily glucose, liver, deeper biological components, it's typically a little bit more psychological. And that tends to show up in those sort of early hours in the morning, causing us to wake usually quite alert where we can't go back to sleep again, right? There's a cortisol response in the wrong time of day. And the best way to address this typically has been looking at your overall circadian rhythm. So every animal on the planet has a circadian rhythm that should be revolving with the sun. right? So when you wake up, there is actually a cortisol spike to wake up in the morning, and it's a good thing. We just don't want it to be humming high all day long. And if it is, it can cause these sort of disruptions and spikes of the night where you wake up and you can't go back to sleep. So there's two key things I recommend in that particular spot. One, what are you doing in that first hour of the day in order to get some sunlight, get some movement, look after your body in a way that can really regulate the morning? And then the second part would be, how are you winding down at the end of the day? Or are you eating right before you go to bed? Are you working right up until you go to bed? Is there something there that's really disrupting that circadian rhythm? Those are some really common ones, and outside of the glucose one, which is really common, I think probably the one I would address more so. So knowing it's 2 to 3, maybe more liver, or, have a look at whether this is more of a biological consideration for you. How can we improve that detoxification of the body in order to sleep better? Or is it really, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm kind of running through the day with a high level of cortisol and I'm not winding down properly, or I'm not setting up the day well at the start? I think being able to reverse engineer that one, you might find where some of those sleep recovery issues might be coming through. All right, so I hope that one helps. Cool. Some afternoons I feel like I hit a brick wall around 3 p.m. Coffee helps for an hour, but then I crash again. What's the real fix for that? Okay, cool. There's a couple things missing from this, mate, but I do want to answer it for you. So where are we going to start? Some afternoons I feel hit around 3 o'clock. So the overall, if we're getting a crash mid-afternoon, there's a couple of things I'll look at, and I think this is very relevant to the discussion we've had around sleep quality, which is we need to look at it as a macro view, not just what's happening in that hour before I get sleepy. Now, it can easily be if you had a really big high carb lunch and you're not utilizing glucose very well, meaning some of your blood sugar markers are quite high and you're in a sedentary role and you're sitting a lot, then that can easily cause you to feel sleepy. But I've seen a lot of this recently, where what you're eating at the start of your day and how you're building or programming your body rather to fuel your body on carbohydrates through the day can cause a lot more volatility later in the day. We've tracked this extensively with a glucose monitor, or CGM, slapped on the back of the arm, and it's tracking glucose throughout the day. Really helpful piece of tech. And what we've found is, as an example, is if you're having a lot of fructose in, say, a morning smoothie, you look at that from the outside and say, yes, this is a healthy meal, but we've seen it causes a lot more volatility in blood sugar throughout the rest of the day, and those afternoon dips usually can relate back to that. So big picture, it's typically overall metabolic health. How can I regulate blood sugar better? But if there's a couple areas that you can change right now is, adjust your breakfast to what we typically recommend as being more of a protein and fat dominant breakfast if you're more sedentary in your work and you've got some body fat to shift. And secondly, of course, the caffeine aspect here, you want to generally manage, because if you're doing coffee later in the day, that kind of borrows from Rob to give to Jill. It's causing you to maybe get through the next few hours now, but it's going to potentially impact your sleep tonight and cause you to be more tired tomorrow, which also increases the risk of you having more coffee tomorrow as well. Right? So being able to look at coffee as one, not actually giving you energy, but rather stopping you going to sleep, right? What it's doing is blocking your adenosine response, which is making you feel tired. So the general structure, to give you one more thing here, will be give yourself an hour to wake up in the morning, move, hydrate, fuel the body properly in the morning first. And then secondly, try not to have that caffeine beyond sort of 12 to 1 o'clock, and give yourself that time to, if you do feel tired, go for a 10-minute walk. I promise you, it'll take the same amount of time as going to the coffee machine, having a bit of chat, and walking back to your desk. It's just go for a walk, get some fresh air outside and come back, and work yourself through that first week or so of needing to get over the hump. And you'll typically find that your energy, if you've improved your breakfast, you've improved your movement through the day, are at least the first two parts that I would give you. I'd need more context to go deeper there, but at least that would be a good place to start. If my thyroid tests are in range, but I still feel tired and can't lose weight, does this mean the tests aren't telling the full story? Yes, but in range is the first thing that I would question, because in range according to who? What I want to bring up here is that at no point am I demonizing doctors. It's more a case of what are they trying to look for? And knowing that thyroid health comes back to responding to how the body works and is incredibly holistic in nature in regards to nutrition and training, make a huge difference to how that thyroid responds. It means the ranges through a functional lens are going to be significantly narrower. So to give you an example, TSH, what I've seen in standard GP tests across New Zealand, Australia, tends to be anywhere from about 0.4 up to 5. Really big range. What we're typically looking through for more of a functional range tends to be more sort of 0.6, 0.8 up to 2. Okay, so a lot tighter, but even that, I'm just talking about TSH. Being able to look into T4 and the ranges we give there, the T3, the antibodies, the reverse T3, that's truly the full picture. So the first two things before I answer something like this is it in range, or is it actually within a range that we would expect? Secondly, are we testing the full picture, or are we just testing TSH? Because I've had so many of these in the last month. Mandy, Fran, our whole clinical team has, where they've said, oh no, my thyroid is fine. We look at their report, all they've had it done is TSH. It's sitting at like 1.8, which arguably, yes, is fine, but we don't know what's happening with T4, T3. And if we are seeing those symptoms come through, it's worth looking at. Of course, it's not just the full picture. If we're starting to see fatigue in the full blood count coming through, if we're starting to see some sort of congestion, some sort of dysregulation of blood sugar, all sorts of things that we can start to address that can cause you to feel tired, not be able to lose weight, that sort of general resistance that comes through. But if you do have that history of thyroid, or you've got a reason to be looking in that range and those symptoms are at least correlating with what you're feeling, I'd be digging, or at least, shoot through some of those numbers so we could take them a bit more. All right. We got one or two more. Supplements. There are so many supplements being pushed for over 40s. We've got MNN, we've got collagens, we've got creatine, magnesium, vitamin D, omega-3s, which one's worth? Well, actually, a lot of the ones that you've mentioned here are pretty good. I've seen big long lists, and I guess the ones that I'm cutting out quite regularly at the moment are a multivitamin. For the average person, it usually gives you too much of the stuff you don't need and not enough of the stuff you do. Which one else? The M&M, that one has been pushed a lot recently. I think it's one of these supplements that's becoming exciting in more of the longevity space. I think it certainly has its place, and if we're going down specific liver protocols and things like glutathione or just general improved methylation and all sorts of things, we're starting to get really in the weeds. So without seeing a direct DNA report or a blood work report that's telling you to go down that sort of improved detoxification pathway, then we can certainly push that. But collagen, the reason we look at that a lot for our clients is one, a very low reaction to a lot of clients in regards to they don't feel bloated, tired, inflamed like they usually would on a vegetarian or very often a whey protein. Magnesium, very, very big fan, but it needs to be the right type, right? There's a lot of blends out there, a lot of oxides. If you see magnesium oxide on the supplement, run the other direction. It is not doing anything for you and might actually be having some downsides. We're looking for a magnesium biglycinate or glycinate. In most cases, sometimes a citrate or other forms are helpful, but for the most part, we want to look for the active form the body can use. Vitamin D, again, we can look at your numbers so we don't have to guess here, but in many cases, mood, even insulin sensitivity, and overall, a couple other markers there, it can be helpful. Omega-3s is awful, anti-inflammatory. I've actually got a mild concussion from a little mountain bike incident in the weekend, and I'm actually kind of doing I was going to say overdosing, but doing some high doses on omega-3 at the moment. I think that this can be a little bit cyclical, but as a baseline, again, really great supplement. Quality matters a lot, and unfortunately, certainly with oils like omega-3 that can be very, very unstable, and the discussion becomes more around, am I getting the quality that I'm after, or am I just taking a supplement that's cheap and kind of not doing anything, right? So as a general rule of thumb for most oils, you want to have it in a dark glass container. You want to know where it's coming from, all of those good things to make sure we're getting a good quality omega-3, all right? So collagen, magnesium, vitamin D, you mentioned those. M&M, not really the case. But yeah, honestly, those are kind of, you're touching on some of the main ones. Magnesium, collagen, maybe a zinc, omega-3s, a B complex are kind of the ones we most recommend. But again, apart from maybe the magnesium and collagen, I'd look into your blood work a bit more so that we're not guessing and giving you supplements that you don't need. So hope that helps. Last one. Okay, Steve, this is more longevity focused. I only have 30 to 40 minutes a day. Is it better to focus on cardio for heart health or strength training for muscles and bones? This is a really good question. Okay, cool. So in this particular case, if you only have 30 to 40 minutes a day, what I would do is I would definitely prioritize the strength training at least 3 to 4 days a week. You don't need to do it every day, but I think that 3 to 4 days a week, I would definitely prioritize the strength training. If I had to choose just one or the other, I would go strength training, because when you're contracting muscles, certainly when you get into your squats, your deadlifts, your bigger movements, there is absolutely an aerobic element too that is definitely going to have some benefit. When I look at the cardio, depending on your age and depending on your goal, which again can change all sorts of things, the cardio is going to be a range. If we want to look at a bit in the zone 2, a bit of zone 3, zone 4, that might be a case of we do the strength training 3 to 4 days a week. We look at a general walk outside of that. Maybe that's 30 minutes weights, 10 minutes walk, or just an ability to get some movement in some other point of the day. And on the days that you're not weight training, we might bring in something a little bit more aerobic. And again, depending on the goal, if it's purely longevity and heart health, or whether it's more fat loss focused, that would adjust my recommendation. And whether it was more interval, if it was more a zone 3-4, or something else there to be a bit more specific. But if within the constraints you've given me with the question, which I quite like, is I'd just be spending a bit more time on the strength training, or at least prioritizing that if I had to choose, and then bringing in the aerobic health to fill in the gaps, as long as I'm recovering well and I know a bit more about the goal. So team, those are really good questions. Thank you for sending those through. Hopefully for the ones that have come through, that's got benefit to you directly here. I can't see any questions directly in the Facebook group. So look, if you are listening and watching along, just again, write live or replay there so I know that this is coming up for you. And if there's any follow-up questions, I'll circle back around tomorrow to answer them for you. But hopefully as an initial starting point, they gave you a nice overview, or at least something to look into from questions that are asked. And of course, the people that asked those questions, thank you again. Hope you will have a great month. We'll be back next week for another deep dive from a live standpoint. But otherwise, I hope you're putting some time aside for you, and your health is seeing the impact from it. Hope you're having a great week. See ya. Bye.